8 names of Asia's richest people. We are familiar with most of them. Li Shaoqi of Hong Kong. The Kwok brothers in Hong Kong, Li Koshing in Hong Kong. Jing Zhoumin from the Philippines. The Wonoeo family of Indonesia. Robert Kuek of Malaysia. Kui Jingming from Singapore. Cheng Yuting of Hong Kong. Why are Asia so rich? The tycoons in Asia's economic growth. What role did it play? With such questions, Stoyle consulted a large number of Asian economic history materials. He also traveled throughout Southeast Asia. Tell them their fortune history and business experience. Written into this book. Stoyle uses the word godfather mainly to highlight the extremely wealthy tycoons, traditional paternalism, and their mystique in the public eye. But this book, not spying on the godfathers, a novel about private life. If you could sum up the core idea of this book in one sentence, that's the rise of the Asian godfathers. Asia's godfathers' contribution to the economy. Far less than is generally believed. How do you understand me with this sentence? We will discuss it in 2 parts. First, what historical background created the Asian godfathers? Second, what are the typical characteristics of the Asian godfathers group? First part, talking about the history of Southeast Asia. We need to remember 2 key words: immigration and colonization. The first keyword, immigration. It is said that the United States is the largest country of immigrants. In fact, Southeast Asia has historically. It is also one of the largest immigration destinations. Take Malaysia as an example. The current population proportion is Malay 69%. Chinese 23%, Indian 7%. Other ethnic groups 1%. Local indigenous people and large numbers of immigrants have coexisted for a long time. Fusion. This is a distinctive feature of Southeast Asia. Early immigrants to Southeast Asia. Mainly people engaged in trade. They are smart. Business adventurous spirit. These outsiders formed a natural division of labor with local people. Local nobles have political power. The immigrant elite was attached to the local aristocracy, responsible for helping them manage the local economy. Such as Thailand. The royal family paid tribute to the Persians and Chinese. A large number of monopoly business licenses were issued. Like slaughtering animals and selling opium, etc. And let them become tax collectors. The second keyword is colonization. Among the 6 economies in Southeast Asia, except Thailand, the remaining 5 have all become Western colonies. Indonesia is a Dutch colony. Malaysia, Singapore and Hong Kong is a British colony. The Philippines was first colonized by Spain. Later the United States defeated Spain. The Philippines became a U.S. colony again. In economic matters, Western colonists were nobler than natives. More reliance on immigrant elites. For the large number of imported Chinese and Indian workers, the colonists did not deal directly with them. Instead, they hire immigrant elites to manage these people. In many areas, the colonists were too lazy to manage it themselves. And development, instead of using a franchise approach, directly package local taxation rights, mining rights, etc. Sold to immigrant elite. For the colonists, this management method is the most efficient. On the one hand, it can be done at minimum cost. To maximize the use of local resources. On the other hand, immigrant elites compete for franchises. He must use all his strength to win favor with the colonists, thus becoming the staunchest supporter of the colonial government. Take Lim Su Leong, the former richest man in Indonesia, as an example. Lin Xiaoliang. They are new immigrants who came to Indonesia in 1938. 1993. Lin Xiaoliang grew up as a small businessman who had just arrived. Became the richest man in Indonesia. There are media reports. The size of his assets. Even more than the American Rockefeller family. But in 1997, Asian financial crisis hits Indonesia hard, leading to social riots. Lin Xiaoliang's political backer Suharto was ousted from power. Lin Xiaoliang had to flee to Singapore in a hurry. Rioting crowd ransacked his home in Indonesia. It can be said that Lin Xiaoliang represents the typical model for Asian godfathers to start their business. An elite from outside, dependent on local political elites, obtain huge profits by relying on monopoly rights. Of course, Lin Xiaoliang's mistake was that too attached to a political strongman. When the strongman falls, his business empire also suffered a huge impact. And some Asian godfathers do it better. They are versatile. Long bet. No matter who the new person is, they can all be protected by those in power. But only if they can only keep doing business. Don't get involved in politics. Otherwise, they will not be tolerated by those in power. Because of this permanent dependence. Some scholars describe the seemingly aloof Asian godfathers as becoming a citizen capitalist. Part 2. Let's take a closer look below. What is this group of Asian godfathers about? What typical characteristics? There are 3 key words here. Adapting to core cash flow and financing. Experts first look at the first keyword, adaptation. You must have noticed Asian godfathers about whom this book was written. Many are of Chinese descent. In the 1990s, when Asian godfathers were at their peak, Chinese only account for 2% of the Philippine population, 4% of Indonesia's population, 10% of Thailand's population. But the Chinese control 45% of the big companies in the Philippines. Control 18 of Indonesia's 20 largest companies. Controls 9 of Thailand's 10 largest companies. On stock markets across ASEAN, Chinese listed companies account for 50% to 80%. So, there is a widely accepted view in Southeast Asia that it's just that the Chinese are born businessmen. The reason why Asian godfathers is successful, thanks to their Chinese cultural traditions. But Stoyle, the author of this book, opposes this view. He believes that Chinese people are born businessmen. It's the same as saying that Jews are born financiers. Belongs to the conversion of Miwu. In fact, Southeast Asian Chinese and European Jews. Financial success precisely because of due to their weak political position. Before 19th century European Jews were not allowed to join trade associations. Cannot engage in trade. Nor can you engage in farming. Only Christians. Prohibited interest-bearing loan business. Allow Jews to participate. So among the Jews, except for the most financiers, the situation of the Chinese in Southeast Asia is similar. When Chinese immigrants arrived in Southeast Asia, often barred from politics, nor can they own their own farmland. only doing business without restrictions. Thus, it's no surprise that the Chinese are good at doing business here. In addition, there is another point that is often overlooked by people. The more successful Asian godfathers the Chinese cultural characteristics they possess the more blurry it becomes The reason is very simple In colonial times Asian godfathers need to work together with Western colonizers Local nobles interact with the Chinese community. They need to speak multiple languages and possess multiple cultural identities to be able to communicate with different groups without barriers. A typical godfather need to be proficient in at least 2 or 3 Chinese dialects such as Cantonese and Hokkien also required to be proficient in English and Southeast Asian native languages You even need to learn to speak Japanese in order to deal with the Japanese in the war. Many church fathers gave themselves native names For example, Lin Shaoliang also called Pseudinosarin So the success of the godfathers not based on their Chineseness on the contrary based on their identity as a cosmopolitan The godfathers are like chameleons. Integrate yourself into various linguistic and cultural environments according to the needs of different occasions, they will to choose your identity For example, Li Koshing he can use English proficiently communicate with foreign subordinates and partners but in public interviews with the media and shareholder meetings Li Koshing only speaks Cantonese with a Chaoshan accent play the role of an authentic local businessman For example, Singapore's founding father Lee Kuan Yew when Singapore first became independent. Lee Kuan Yew's official name is Hariri He said in a speech in the United States just like President Kennedy is no longer Irish I am no longer Chinese But after the 1980s with the rise of mainland China he found emphasizing Singapore's Chinese heritage is more popular. So Hariri disappeared replaced by Lee Kuan Yew By the way in this book Stoyle counts Lee Kuan Yew as the godfather of Asia. I don't quite agree with this Lee Kuan Yew was a politician rather than a businessman This is the essential difference between him and the Asian godfathers. Good I mentioned earlier the first typical characteristic of Asian godfathers is to be highly culturally adaptable In business Asian godfathers also have a typical characteristic It started with a franchise Monopoly benefits from franchising become the core cash flow of the godfathers They built a huge business empire Of all franchises the most profitable sector may be the gaming industry. There are at least 6 Asian godfathers It started with a monopoly in the gaming industry. For example, Stanley Ho in Macau. Since 1961, obtained the monopoly right to operate Macau's gaming industry. In 1986, it gained another 15-year monopoly. In Malaysia, Lin Wutong, founder of Genting Group, has been in business since 1969. Obtained the only casino license in Malaysia. His casino. It is also the only legal casino in Malaysia. Lin Wutong won the title of Amusement Gambling King. Later, Lin Wutong successively entered real estate, power generation, paper making and other fields. But his core cash flow still comes from casino revenue. In addition to the gaming industry, monopoly rights to import agricultural products. It is also extremely profitable. For example, Lin Xiaoliang mentioned earlier. He monopolized half of Indonesia's clove imports and all flour imports. Malaysia's richest man Robert Kuok, known as Asia's Sugar King, for decades he monopolizes 85% of Malaysia's sugar import quota, and then monopolized the cane sugar processing industry. China's famous grain and oil brand Arowana. It's owned by Robert Kuok. Hong Kong under British colonial rule. The Godfathers also rely on franchises to obtain core cash flow. It's here style challenges our common sense. It is said that Hong Kong is the freest economy in the world. Economics Nobel laureate neoliberal standard bearer Milton Friedman for decades he has always praised Hong Kong as a bastion of the free market. This is really it. Is that true? In fact, just the opposite. Hong Kong economic structure. With what we said before. Typical features of colonial economy. For the convenience of rule, British colonists always in Hong Kong touting various franchises from power system various public utilities such as buses, TV stations, etc. Export quotas to textiles all sold out. Proceeds from the sale of franchises accounted for 40% of the British Hong Kong government's fiscal revenue. The remaining 60% is mainly due to land auctions. The result is that Hong Kong's economy is highly monopolized by the Godfathers. The market is not free competition at all. A senior assistant of Li Ka-shing he once said to Stoyle personally, Hong Kong is full of cartels. If the government wants to give you a monopoly, take this opportunity. In this regard, Hong Kong economist Lin Xingji. There is a quite incisive summary. I excerpt here. Asian Godfathers. Most are not engaged in the most prosperous export industry. Because export business has to face international competition. That means even if the orders come in, business is promising, but the profit is ordinary. From a profit-making perspective, do export trade, especially running a factory, earn hard-earned money, and in comparison, it is a small profit from profit investment. So avoid it. Regarded as the best policy. Businesses they are more interested in is a port terminal telecommunications service utility, gambling entertainment and property development. The common feature of these projects is that they have patents or only a few competitors. Therefore, it is easy to form a cartel, thereby making a lot of money. Hong Kong, during the colonial period. Common people. Although the nominal tax paid is very low. But the rent and living expenses they pay. But it is the highest in the world. Similarly, container handling charges at Hong Kong terminals. It is also the most expensive in the world. More than twice as high as the German terminal. The labor force in Hong Kong is much cheaper than in Germany. This is because the Hong Kong terminal is also highly monopolized. Li Ka-shing owns 14 berths out of 24 berthing ports. Remaining berths Beijing Yutong carve it up with real estate oligarchs such as the Kuok brothers. For a long time Li Ka-shing puts the core cash flow obtained from the port. Use it for real estate speculation. Some investment banks believe if there is no stable terminal income. As early as the 1980s, when Hong Kong's real estate crashed, Li Ka-shing just go bankrupt. Except port. Li Ka-shing also worked with British business firm EHA Group. Monopolizes 70% of department store retail in Hong Kong and 70% of pharmaceutical sales. Together with the Jewish family monopolize Hong Kong's electricity system. These monopolies together they form Li Ka-shing's core cash flow. Beyond adaptation and core cash flow. The third typical characteristic of wealthier Asia have superb financing methods. During colonial rule, Southeast Asia's financial industry is monopolized by European and American banks. They tend to only give to local Western multinationals. Provide loans. And Asian businessmen want access to capital. Must pay high loan rebates through compradors. One Asian godfather recalled colonial times and said, "For Chinese businessmen to meet a decision-maker from the British colonial bank its difficulty is equivalent to meeting God. But in Hong Kong godfathers try to cooperate with the monopoly HSBC Bank, who can get financial support from HSBC. Whoever has the opportunity to stand out. For example, Bao Yugang, known as the world's shipping king. Just a typical representative. Bao Yugang bought his first cargo ship in 1955. Officially entered the shipping industry. After it hit a golden development period in the shipping industry. After World War II. In order to support the country's shipbuilding industry, the Japanese government loans to foreign buyers ordering Japanese ships. The loan amount can reach 80% of the shipbuilding cost. At the same time, due to the post-war economic prosperous Japan, the import and export trade volume of general trading companies has greatly increased. They are willing to cooperate with foreign shipping companies. Sign a long-term charter contract for more than 10 years. And the rent is guaranteed by the Bank of Japan. There is almost no risk for the ship. That is to say, Bao Yugang only needs to pay for the shipbuilding costs himself. 20% of the amount. You can order ships from Japanese shipyards. Then rent the ship to a Japanese general trading company. When the lease expires, this ship belongs entirely to him. This is a highly profitable and steady business. Very few people know. Bao Yugang's son-in-law said to Stoyle, "Only the brain of a banker. Only then can we see opportunities to take advantage of the government's generous policies." Bao Yugang saw the opportunity. But his problem is not enough money to build enough ships. At this critical moment, HSBC decided to lend a large amount of money to Bao Yugang. And together with him, he invested in 3 shipping companies. With funding from HSBC. By 1979, Bao Yugang's fleet has 202 ships. Total load capacity exceeds 20 million tons. This is the largest fleet in the world, far surpassing the 2 major shipping kings in Greece, Onassis and Nile. The sum of the fleets of Hoth. Bao Yugang thus gained the title of World Shipping King. As for those godfathers who made their fortune in real estate, it is even more necessary to rely on the relationship with HSBC Bank. After World War II, the prices of land auctioned by the British Hong Kong government are getting higher and higher. By the mid-1990s, a few pieces of land would cost $1 billion. At this moment, there are only a few godfathers who have a good relationship with HSBC. Can get a loan to acquire land. Other small developers are naturally excluded. The profits from real estate projects in Hong Kong are terrifyingly high. According to the data provided in this book here, the minimum yield is 77%. The highest rate of return can reach 364%. If the godfathers of Hong Kong were just working with banks here. Special relationship here. So in the Philippines, Indonesia and Malaysia, the godfathers went straight into banking here. After these countries gained independence here, opened up the financial sector to domestic private capital here. The number of domestic private banks has skyrocketed here. Philippines after 20 years of independence here. There are 33 private banks here. Indonesia is more exaggerated here. Before the 1997 Asian financial crisis here, there are 240 private banks here. Almost every godfather went into banking here. Even each interest group has its own bank here. For example, President Suharto's children own banks here. The fund that accepted bribes for Suharto had banks. Different factions in the army also have their own banks here. Originally, Indonesia allowed private banks to open here. I want to solve the long-term problem here. Corruption and inefficiency in state-owned banks here. Some experts think here. Solution to this problem here. That is here. Liberalize financial regulation here. Allow private banks to compete with state banks here. But practice has proven here. This idea is too naive here. In Indonesia, the threshold for starting a bank is very low. Only $12 million is needed here. And you can also take part of the bank's equity. Obtained a listing on the Jakarta securities market, thereby raising more funds here. But these listed private banks here, not serving the best interests of shareholders at all. Instead, it became a source of cheap funds for the godfathers here. Southeast Asia. It has one of the highest savings rates in the world. Coupled with the post-war economic prosperity of Southeast Asia, these private banks can absorb abundant funds. The godfathers put bank money here, lending large amounts to other companies under its umbrella. Let the bank become the cash machine of your business empire. Indonesian legal provisions. Bank-related loans cannot exceed 20%. And in actual operation, related loans are often as high as 60% to 90%. Once those affiliated companies still don't pay, causing bank failure. The first to lose are ordinary savers and small shareholders. And if the private bank is large enough, the government will also provide assistance. Of course, it's taxpayers' money. During the 1997 Asian financial crisis, Central Bank Indonesia, a total of 4 donations to the private banks of the godfathers. $14 billion in emergency loans to cope with the rush. But Stoyle speculated it is possible that the godfathers took most of this money, used it to buy foreign exchange. Thus, during a crisis, move your assets abroad. Indonesia's practice proves without strict financial regulation, private bank performance probably worse than state-owned banks. The 1997 Asian financial crisis eliminated some godfathers. But most godfathers emerged from the crisis unscathed. Even consolidated its position in the crisis. Stoyle thinks unless Southeast Asia is undergoing a radical institutional change. Otherwise, it will be difficult to change the status quo. Okay, let's sort it out. Characteristics of the Asian godfathers group. Both in colonial and post-colonial times. Asian godfathers are all dependent on political elites. Obtain monopoly profits through franchising. They are highly culturally adaptable. Build a huge business empire based on core cash flow. And they are all financing experts. Stoyle thinks. Asia's godfathers are beneficiaries of Southeast Asia's economic growth. Rather than a driver of growth. Their success, relying on special favors from the government, rather than the market competitiveness of the enterprise itself. After all, the Asian godfather, just a shrewd businessman in a rent-seeking environment, whether they are in business management, or in terms of talent cultivation. No special achievements. Many godfathers donated money to do charity, but mostly just for investment. Shen Huming. They themselves have no social benefits. However, regarding the development difficulties in Southeast Asia, the Asian godfather is not the first person responsible. After all, a businessman's job is just to make money. The task of politicians is to protect social interests. In some meaning. Some Southeast Asian countries. We haven't really left the colonial era yet. No one has a sense of responsibility. And a political elite with a sense of mission. To be responsible for the fate of the entire community. This is the saddest thing. Thanks.